In this short presentation, I will show you that irrationality is inherent in all of us, and this in turn affects the quality of the decisions we make. A study at Washington and Iowa State Universities revealed the behavior under stressful conditions. A group of students were asked to remember a two-digit number, and another group was asked to remember a seven-digit number. They were then offered a choice of a plate of chocolate cake or a bowl of fruit salad. Amazingly, a statistically significant number of those who had to remember the seven-digit number chose chocolate cake. Later, however, they admitted that they should have opted for the more healthier fruit salad. The conclusion is that under stressful conditions, we tend to settle for a more comforting or soothing decision rather than an optimal one. New York plastic surgeon Derek Antel looked at the jawlines of CEOs, and he found that almost 90% of the top CEOs had a prominent chin. We might ask, why? Or what's so significant? Except that only 40% of the general population has a protruding chin. So we see that even chairmen, boards of directors, and selection committees are influenced by perception. What about risk takers? Another research study showed that actually risk takers have fewer dopamine autoreceptors, which actually are responsible for this thrill-seeking behavior. They concluded that there is scientific evidence indicating that some risk takers might be genetically wired. Dr. Dan Ariely at the MIT Sloan School of Business conducted an interesting experiment where he asked students to take sips from two different mugs of beer, and they would get a jar of that particular beer of their choice. What they were not told was that one contained pure beer and the other contained beer with 2 drops of vinegar. In the first experiment, when the students were not told about the vinegar, the majority preferred the beer with the vinegar. However, in the second experiment, when they were told which glass contained the beer laced with the vinegar, the majority preferred the regular beer. The conclusion was that the students were put off by a preconceived notion that contaminated beer would taste bad. What happens when we have a choice? Williams-Sonoma, a high-end kitchen equipment retailer in the USA, found that when they placed the $85 bread machine on the shelves, it did not sell well. So rather than remove the machine, they introduced a $135 bread machine and placed it right next to the cheaper unit. Lo and behold, the sales of the cheaper machine increased dramatically. The conclusion is that people felt they were getting a bargain. Now they were focusing on the cheaper one, not whether they even needed a bread machine. A supermarket chain was interested to study the behavior of their shopping personnel. So they displayed varieties of jams. On some days, they displayed 6 varieties, and on other days, they displayed 24 varieties. Crowds were excited irrespective of how many were presented. However, the sales figure showed something interesting, that when 6 were presented, only 30% of the customers purchased jam, while when 24 were presented, only 3% purchased jam. Conclusion: people confused by too many choices opted not to make a decision. Preconceived notions. Here's an article published by the Business Week magazine of a research study by Stanford University and Caltech. They wired up their students and put them through MRI machines. But before being submitted to the experiment, students were asked to taste samples of wine, and they were also given access to the price tag. But unbeknown to them, the same wine was presented with 2 different price tags, one with the $5 actual price and another with the $45 fictional price. Amazingly, all of them preferred the more expensive wine. Science and research have given some interesting conclusions. Perceptions and herd mentality drive our decisions. Our decisions are influenced by preconceived notions. If there are no options, people tend to procrastinate and avoid making a decision. If there are too many options, people are confused, hence reluctant to make a decision. If there are only one of two options, people rush to the cheaper or better option, even if a decision is not warranted. Under stressful conditions, we tend to settle for a comforting or soothing decision rather than an optimal one. And there is scientific evidence to indicate that some risk takers might be genetically wired. So I ask you the question, do you agree that some of your decisions could be affected by this type of human tendencies? Because science and research tells us where, how and why we go wrong, but they don't tell us how we can minimize the impact of such failings. This is our role. We help people make better decisions. We encourage you to take the online course at www.xpertus.com.